Our guest today, Shane Ram, grew up in and currently resides in Trinidad, a country of 1.4 million people, slightly north of Venezuela. When he grew up, he had no electricity until the age of 11, yet his love for learning drove him to get 2 master's degrees, one in e-business and another in strategic thinking. Shane has a company called Go for 10 and wrote a book called Future Ready Leadership. On the podcast today, John and I explore with Shane how an original sensitizing event from our past can drive our behaviors and actions in the present. We also hear from Shane about what he calls the 5 steps to freedom. Here's Shane Ram. Shane, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rich and John.
Yeah, happy to have you here. If you could give us just a brief intro to who you are for our audience, would be great.
Okay, absolutely. So my name, of course, is Shane Ram. I'm a life and leadership coach, author, and keynote speaker. But in terms of that life and leadership, what I do, Rich, is I get to the root cause of what has entrepreneurs or leaders stuck. Whether it be growing their income, getting over procrastination, negative leadership behaviors. What I do is I get to the root cause of that, help them to identify what they are not able to see themselves, because that's what really coaches do. They stand on the sideline and look along to see where you might be going off course, as the case may be, and get you back on track. So ultimately, what I want for other people really is what I want for myself, a life of fulfillment, happiness. Freedom is also very important to me, and getting to that, that proverbial why, why do you do what you do, was really important, because I told you I came off another conversation recently, and they were asking me what I think was so important about entrepreneurship or entrepreneurs to think about. And one of the things I said was that I build my business around my life and not the other way around, because I see business as a subset of life, and entrepreneurship, as the case may be, a subset of life. And I think, it really becomes easier, if you want to put it that way, if you live an integrated life all together. So those are some of what I do and the ways that I help entrepreneurs and leaders.
That's great. Thank you for that. You didn't know it, but I did get a copy of your book.
Oh, okay.
And had a question for you on it. Your book, for those that are listening and don't have the benefit of the visual, your book is printed in a non-traditional way that it is not, vertically printed. It's horizontally printed. Why did you select to print it horizontally?
I wanted to have as many things different about the book as possible, because I think one of the things, Rich, is that why I started, my company Go for 10, and the concept behind it, and what I do even individually, is I see change, for example, as a sort of 3-step process. One is that you need to see it as it is, then you need to see it better than it is, and go to work. Step 3, go to work to make it better than it is. So part of that step 1 of seeing it as it is, we need to, when I did my research, because I was doing my business plan around it, Go for 10 is really an education ecosystem that I call it, was that 60 to 80% of managers are not good at leading others. That's why we have a leadership problem. So we need to figure out why. We need to acknowledge that we have a big leadership problem. Most people in entrepreneurship fail within the first 5 years. Okay, that's a fact. Let's take a health perspective. Most people, at least 50% of the world are either overweight or have some chronic disease, as the case may be. And what I'm saying is that that's a function of 2 things. It's either we don't know what to do, or we don't know how to do it. Okay, and what that does is that it begins to challenge the status quo, and that's what I really wanted to do with the book, because I love sciences, and there's a law that says an object in motion continues in motion unless it's given an opposing force. Okay, so in the coaching personal development world is known as a conscious interrupt. Okay, so how do I get you to think differently? What do I say? What do I present to you to kind of stop your normal way of thinking? Because if you continue to think the same way, you're going to get the same results that you've always been getting. It's easy enough to say that, but I'm always intrigued in, okay, what should I do? How do I achieve that? Okay, so I wanted everything about the book to be different. I wanted people to reorient the book, so they reorient their minds, so that they reorient how they do things all together. So as you would have seen, it's a mixture of, I call it a semi workbook in there, because there's stuff to fill out. There are probably, I don't know, several hundred questions in there that cause you to think and to analyze. So it's not just a book on theory on leadership. Yeah, read through the pages. Okay. No, it's all about challenging the status quo, about giving you a conscious interrupt, about getting you to be practical about things, get your ideas down on a piece of paper. You have no excuses. Um, that's the idea.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
One of the things that you talk about in the book that I assume you're looking to interrupt for leaders is you use a term command and control in terms of a style of leadership. I
absolutely.
think I know what that means, but if you could put some words to that for our listeners on what is a command and control style of leadership, and then ultimately what should they be interrupted by to do what instead?
Okay, absolutely. Great question, Rich. And so command and control, basically it's an idea, it's a mindset, I guess, that I am the manager, therefore I know best. And I dictate to you, I command, I control what you do. And the opposite of that is, well, you're a valuable employee. I love to hear your ideas as well. So that's the opposite side. Your views, your ideas will be taken on equally. I, as a leader, will weigh those ideas. The command and control might look like, yeah, I hear you, Rich, but I want it done this way. Okay, so that's sort of command and control. We also control. We want to control, behaviors, the what people do, how they do it, the times they do it. For example, trying to dictate all of that to the people that we lead. The opposite of that is that, well, the conscious interrupt is that. The fact is that it's not working. Employees are not performing. They are disengaged. Okay, and what I want to say to the leaders, yes, that means you looking at this, because part of the command and control is that, that might be so, that statistic might be true, but not for me. Okay, I'm not one of those 80%. Okay, so if you're looking at this, most likely you are in that 80%. Okay, so that's a fact that this is happening. The reason why employee engagement is a big issue is because they are engaged. A large portion is highly disengaged, and what that means is that not that they're only hands off, but they might actually be deliberately sabotaging the performance of your department or your company. Okay, so that should be a wake up call. That should be a conscious interrupt. So what we're trying to get them to do is to understand that, as human beings, we have different strengths. The idea as a leader that we will not know everything. We cannot be. We are not that superhuman that we think that people expect of us. And I always say that sometimes when we get that promotion, that is the case. Maybe there seems to be an invisible cape that is added on to that letter, and we have to strap it on and now become Superman or whatever superhero you believe in. And I have to know everything. I have to be able to solve everything, and I have to be in control of everything. And one, it's impossible, versus that I get more done if I utilize the strengths, if I take the time to understand the strengths of my team and what they are capable of and how I could harness this, for example, that's some of the new thinking that I want leaders to have, and to feel comfortable that I could um, be honest and open about the weaknesses that I have, and it shows that I'm a human too, and then you become very very relatable to your staff, because your staff is running around talking to the other staff members. He thinks he knows it all. He thinks he's in control, but he really has no clue what's happening. He doesn't know we are sabotaging some of the stuff that is going on. We are underperforming. We are cutting off work at 2. Yeah, yeah. So that's the conversation, and the gap that is happening between what the leaders think is happening and what's really happening in the organization. So command and control versus empowerment of people, respecting their abilities. And I think, Rich, what that really boils down to is confidence in oneself. Because I remember one of my most memorable occasions in leadership was someone saying, I don't know. That to say, and I don't feel badly because I don't know, but I feel being authentic and honest. I could say I'll certainly look into it. That's a good question, I'll get back to you, versus I don't want to look incompetent, so I'll give you a BS answer, and you would accept it because I'm in control. I'm the boss. I know what's right.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
great, Shane. I love where you're going with that, and certainly, I've learned as well over time that, if somebody does ask you a question you don't know the answer to, I've been recently made aware that one of the best responses is, "Thank you for asking that question. I'd love to get the answer to that as well, and
Yeah.
I'll get back to you," as opposed to your point, the BS answer. I want to step back a couple of steps, but then I want to go right back to where you were. The name of your book is Future Ready Leadership. And the name of your company is Go for 10.
Yeah.
Again, I can make some assumptions as to why it's future ready
Yeah.
and what is Go for 10. But can you tell us a little bit more about the titling of both the book and your company? Because I think it has a deeper meaning there.
Absolutely. So if I may, John, I want to start with the Go for 10 concept.
Sure,
Okay,
please.
and it's very similar to what I said to Rich in terms of what I do is understanding the concept that whether there's a 1% who achieve that proverbial success. The fact is that it said one person with courage is a majority. So if one person, and it's not only one, are able to do it, the fact is that there is some information, there is some knowledge, there is some know-how, there are some ways to actually achieve success in any particular thing that at least one person has had success with. Okay, so that has been my lifelong journey, because it was a personal journey. As you would know, in entrepreneurship, a lot of times it's first trying to solve your own problem and then realizing that there are so many other people with the same problem. You start to share the solution with them. So having grown up in a very poor background, almost dying of starvation when I was 5, to not having electricity or running water when I was 11. And 11 is, in my part of the world, is when you move from primary school to secondary school. That's what we call it in this part of the world. So there's an exam to take to move from one level to the next. And I would have had to use a kerosene lamp to get the light to study with. And based on that background, my parents at that time certainly wasn't thinking about their son going to university. And when it came around that he might be a little bit intelligent, he can go to university and make something of himself, my mom started to work to get the income to pay for university, and that meant getting up at wee hours of the morning and that sort of thing. So when I got to university, it was like I just couldn't fail. Okay, so what happened was that someone was asking me, Shane, why do you think you have success? And that's all relative compared to maybe some of the people that you would have been at the same level or year in, as the case may be. And I said, well, I gave the backstory. I just couldn't fail, and it was a driver for me. And then
Sure.
the person said, well, I could understand that, but you may not have been the only person in that position. Could it be something deeper? And I thought about it, and the answer that just came up intuitively, I would say now, is that because I came from zero, if you want to put it that way, or almost. Most people will be happy with a 7 life, using a 10-point scale. And I said, I don't settle for 7, I go for 10. That's what came out of me, and then we turn it into a brand, into a concept. How do you, in this human one life that we have, that we don't settle, we go for our best. We may not always have success, but that happiness comes from growth, and probably below everything else of what I do, it's about happiness and freedom. So happiness comes from that growth, from that pursuit of being your best self, or better self, or better at what you do. So go for 10 is always about going and going forward, aiming for that
Right.
absolute peak at whatever you working
Yeah,
on.
I'm happy I asked that question because I love hearing the story
Yeah.
behind how that came to be. So now bring me to future ready leadership. Why is it future ready leadership versus just ready leadership? Why
Yeah.
is it future based in your mind?
Well, I think part of a leader's role is to look into the future, to anticipate what is happening. And I think too many leaders are bogged down into the minutiae of the daily task, and being busy with being busy, and that sort of thing, and not really projecting. And one of the chapters and strategies I have in that book, Rich, is about intuition. So I was also looking at my intuition, because when I started Go for 10 a couple of years ago, I remember in mid 2019, I changed the motto. It's called Go for 10, education for the new way of living.
Mm-hmm.
New way of living. Okay, and now we're talking about the new normal, and that stuff. So somehow I anticipated, I just couldn't put my finger that it was going to be COVID and of this nature, but somehow I felt that we just could not continue like this, and we need to understand what the future is going to hold, what it's going to look like. So the context is VUCA, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, um, ambiguous, right? So that's the context that leaders are working in, that the future, but is going to be that way. But I also said in there, Rich, that the future is now. Okay, and I wanted it as far as the strategies can be evergreen, that it be an evergreen book, in the sense that there will always be a future, so to speak. And how do you best position yourself as an individual and your company to not just survive this volatility, this uncertainty, but to thrive in it? And so that's how I sort of came up with the concept. And truth be told, at that point in time, it really stemmed from a keynote that I did. So I have to pay tribute to the association, which is some chartered accountants, had asked me to do this keynote. And future ready seemed to be one of those buzzwords at that point in time: future ready leadership, future of work, future of this. So I have to give some kudos to them to sort of
Sure.
initiating the idea. And I wrote the keynote, and then suddenly COVID happened, and I said, this is what I spoke about. I have
Yeah.
the 8 strategies, let's turn it into a book.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so going to some actionable strategies. If I'm an entrepreneur and I'm struggling with an aspect of my business, I certainly, from your experience, if I had some sessions with you, I can definitely understand how you could help me root cause, see it as it is, see it better than it is, and then help me put a strategy and go to work, or
Right.
that conscious interrupt, right? Interrupt my conscious. And Rich, you and I used to call it scratching the record, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Changing your paradigm. And but talk to me about, if an entrepreneur isn't working with you, Shane, specifically, and either they need to scratch their own record or have their own conscious interrupt, and or do it with members on their team who are maybe stuck in a rut, and they got to
Yeah.
help them conscious interrupt to move in a different direction. What are some actionable strategies that entrepreneurs can use for both themselves and their teams to deploy that strategy of conscious interrupt?
Well, great question, John, and thanks for that. I think one of the the self-analysis, which is really chapter 1 that I have in the book, slow down to speed up. Okay. What that means is to take that honest look at it. It should become part of your your routine, so to speak, as an entrepreneur. Frequent slowing down to speed up, frequent self-analysis. What I do is really does not take a long time, and that's the thing about it, John, is to we could utilize the bonus chapter in there, or you could follow my resources. I have free resources in terms of how do we peel back that onion, as I call it, to really get to the root cause of it. So if I could quickly explain to you, because what is happening is that people, if they feel stuck, it means that they're not having the results that they want to have. Okay. And what they think that they need to do is they need to change their actions to get a different results, to change their actions or their behaviors. Now, the trouble with most of the systems that exist today and in the past have been trying to get people to change their behavior at the behavioral level. If that makes sense. All right. You're procrastinating. Well, get off your butt and just do it. You're playing small. Go big. Go for 10, as the case may be, and just take action, take massive action. But your nervous system is actually pulling you back, as the case may be, and that's what I mean. That we have been trying to change the behavior at the behavioral level, but just below the behavior is, so let's just take procrastination, which I think it's a big challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs, or even playing small. I think it's a big one, doing way less than they're actually capable of. So if we take that as a behavior that we want to change, that we have analyzed that we are able to do that, and I just want to stick a pin here to say, John, that it's really difficult to do this on your own, and that's really why you need a coach or a mentor to really, because we can't see ourselves. We have a saying in the Caribbean that monkey cannot see their own tails. Okay, which means that we're not able to see that. So once we understand those behaviors, then what I do is to help them to understand, well, what's the story you're telling yourself? What's the thought that you're telling yourself? So just before you procrastinate, you might say, well, I'm not sure this is going to work. I knew someone who tried this and it didn't work. I tried it the last time and it didn't work. Okay. Now, so that's the story, or the thought that we have just before the behavior. Now, those stories are fueled by emotions, which is the third level of the onion, so to speak. So, what are the emotions? Most common one in the world: fear. Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of looking bad. If you left the corporate world and you started an entrepreneurial venture, boy, you don't want to fail, because those guys in the corporate world with their cushy jobs are going to be laughing at you. So that's fear, and below fear is what we call a belief. Okay. And that really drives our destiny, our belief systems. And the most common one in the world is, I'm not good enough. That's the most common one, right? And I'm just being practical, literally peeling back the onion for you with an example of procrastination or playing small, which are some of the negative behaviors that leaders and entrepreneurs suffer from. And then below that was driven by an incident. Okay, a pivotal incident, what we call the original sensitizing event. So what happens if we go back up the onion now is that, if you think about it, we are all born with this ultimate potential, just came from the hands of God. If you ever held a child, you always wonder, I wonder what they're going to be, right? At that time, you're not thinking small, you're not holding back. Kids don't hold back. They don't care about what other people think. We have all these programs, kids do the darndest thing, and we laugh, and they don't really care what we think. Okay, so something happened, and we have operated our entire lives based on that original sensitizing event. And this concept is revolutionary. And the reason I say that is that, and I'm going to dance on the table soon, and I'll tell you why, because Oprah, in all of the years of her shows, interviewing the absolute, best people in the world in their respective fields of psychology or behavior, whatever it is, human performance. What she has found to be the most transformational idea was that there's nothing wrong with you, but something happened to you, and that's what we call the original sensitizing event. Now you can't change the event; you could change the beliefs around the event. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's part of peeling back the onion, and I mean, figuring that out, I have found brings an aha moment. Okay, now that doesn't necessarily change anything, and then now we go through the process now of rebuilding the onion consciously, because that event, if it has, obviously those events have strong mental and emotional attachments to them, so much so that it goes to the nervous system level. So that's why change is so difficult, because we are controlled by our nervous system, and those events create a programming. Okay, and what that means is how the brain works is really by association. Okay, and the best way I could explain this is, my daughter, 2.5, came home one day with a little cardboard with red, yellow, and green traffic light. Okay, so at 2.5, she knew that red means stop, green means go. Okay, and it was very funny because she used to sit rear facing, and when I see green, she would see red, and I'll be pulling off, and she's like, "Daddy, you're on red." "Daddy, you're on red," right? So at 2.5, for the rest of her life, we are never going to have to teach her that red means stop. She is programmed with that information, unless maybe COVID causes color blindness and we can't see red anymore. We might need to change that association to purple means stop. Okay, so that's an analogy that I use, that if we are to change this, and the nervous system automatically reacts to this. We don't need to think about it when we are approaching a traffic light and we see it to be red. We automatically move our foot from the accelerator to the brake. You don't stop to say, what does that mean again? You'll get into an accident by that. It's automatic. Okay, so it's so important to get to that nervous system and reprogram it. All right. So how do we reprogram it now? I call it 5 steps to freedom. Okay. So step number one is
really. Just to recap real quick, just to make sure I understood. So the layers of the onion that you talk about are, sometimes you try and change the behaviors.
Yes.
But if you start peeling it back, what I understood was it goes from behaviors to the stories you have, to the emotions, the fear and everything you have behind it, to the belief systems, not good enough, to the incident that actually impacted that nervous system. And that's the layers of the onion that you try and rebuild consciously. And I think what you're going to talk about now are the 5 steps to change that nervous system understanding of is that correct?
Yep. Five easy steps. It takes consistency and persistency and awareness. It's so important. So step number 1 is awareness. Figure out, and that's why you need a coach, when I'm exhibiting these behaviors. Okay, so in my book and my programs, I have it, listed out in terms of entrepreneurship. As I said, it could be procrastination, perfectionism, waiting for the right time. I mean, I've coached entrepreneurs where I've tried to get them to start blogging, and it could be a 2-paragraph blog, and they want to make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. That perfectionism, that playing small, that too worried about what people think, right? So there's a sort of checkbox or database, if you want to put it that way, and it could be applied to anything else. Okay, so what are those negative behaviors that you want to change? And when you catch that, step number 2 is to identify the story that you told yourself to cause you to procrastinate, to cause you to play small. Okay, so you identify what that story or that thought was. Step number 3 now is that you question that story or that thought. Okay, if it was, or belief, I'm not good enough, or it didn't work for him, so it's probably not going to work for me. If I try this, it could probably fail. Okay, so step number 3 is to really question those stories or beliefs. Is it true? Is it rational? And most of the time, you'll find what I call it's protective. Okay, I'll play small so I don't fail big. I'm going to protect myself. I'm not going to do this so I don't fail. I'm going to protect myself. So it's protective and primal is what I call it. And the reason why I say it's primal because it's survival mode, protective mode is what. So that's step number 3. Step number 4 is to identify a powerful thought, story, or belief. So, suppose I tried and it doesn't work. I'll learn something new. All right. And not because Rich failed at it, I'm going to fail it. I'm going to make sure that it's a success. Okay. So tell yourself, and again, we don't leave you hanging. We kind of create with you what those powerful beliefs, could be. And step number 5, most importantly, is that you act. You do the thing that you're procrastinating on. You start that podcast because you were afraid of going live on LinkedIn and making mistakes and looking like a fool. You take action, and that process of, and even if you want to break it down to even 2, is like you're telling yourself, is this protective or is this powerful? Is this a protective thought or belief, or is this a powerful thought or belief? And you choose a powerful. Most importantly, you take action. And that's how you start rewiring your nervous system. And of course, it's important to have a good environment, a good support system, people who would allow you to go through the transition and still fail sometimes, or still exhibit some of the old behavior, as long as you're committed to working on that. And that simple process is how you create that neurological rewind, and most importantly, take action.
And is that neurological? Let me back up. The original sensitizing event, when do you find that those occur in people's lives?
Okay, so typically in childhood, I would say, so basically a child, a baby, as the case may be, they start picking up information, if you want to put it that way, from the last trimester, and it's sort of in hypnotic mode, the brain, so to speak, until 9, as the case may be. Now, I'm not saying that older than that it's not possible, because I have a list of typical events that can happen in childhood and events and that could happen in adulthood. For example, going through a divorce, or being fired from a job, for example, losing a loved one, losing a child, for example. All of those are, sensitizing events. It affects you down to the nervous system level. It causes you to become apathetic, lose initiative, for example. So typically, I would say, Rich, in childhood, most of the instances that I have found in helping people through this process happens in childhood.
Got it. And in the 5 steps to freedom, just to recap for my understanding and our listeners, the first one is get awareness of the behavior. You can get that either from a coach, or sometimes people do like a 360 survey, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So get aware of that blind spot.
Yeah.
Number 2 is identify the story. So in order to identify the story, you kind of need to go back to maybe a childhood event to say, where did I first have an experience of maybe a story that may have led to that behavior?
Yeah.
And then in number 3 is question the story. So ask, is it true? Is that rational? Is this really protective or primal? And if they are, that would be a story that you may want to then do. Number 4 is identify a more powerful story or a thought, and then ultimately take action differently.
Yeah.
So when there's an event in childhood or there's an event in adulthood, would you say the typical response to that is to go into protective or primal mode?
Typically, I would say, Rich, what you have found is that even the people with extreme success, sometimes that is a response to sometimes a negative original sensitizing event. Because from that event, if you feel not good enough, for example, you're going to want to knock it out of the ballpark at everything that is that comes in your way, right, to prove that I am good enough. So I'll give you a personal example. One of my critical sensitizing events is around my dad. I didn't have the recognition from him. I'm a little boy, doing well in sport in school, and you expect at least, yeah, good job. I'm proud of you. And it's only when I did this exercise on myself, when I peel back the onion, one of my drivers for success, so to speak, was ultimately, quietly, subconsciously hoping one day, right, to get that recognition. Finally, you're good enough. I am proud of you. Yeah. So sometimes it can drive people to, massive success. And there are many examples of that if you sit down and listen to stories of, maybe Lady Gaga, for example. Oprah interviewed her, and, she was, traumatized, raped at the age of 19, and the whole story of her keeping that pain inside of her. But that was a big driver of her. But until she dealt with that event of putting a different meaning, a belief, because you can't change those events, they're real. But one of the best books about that is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Okay, so meaning and belief in my model is the same thing. So essentially, an event happened, and you put a meaning to it, and based on the meaning that you put it, you feel a particular way. Yes, so we sort of go through different scenarios. Yes, you were a victim. Yes, you were victimized, but you don't need to be a victim, so to speak. Yes, you were. We're not denying the events, but how could you be a victor in this case, right? And no relation to Viktor Frankl, but that victim victor, that's the primal, the protective. Well, I don't want to be a victim anymore, or will use that incident to be an excuse versus, well, what's the powerful thought that I can have? How could I be victorious instead of being a victim? And that's how we have the term victim thinking, for example, coming up. So, and just to clarify one point there, Rich, on step number one, after you have a coach or a mentor help you to understand what those behaviors are, it's really important for the individual to understand it in the moment. I just procrastinated, and I have a funny story about myself. Because procrastination, you don't procrastinate about simple things. You procrastinate with things that could actually change your business and change your life. Okay. And I found that I would always get up to either go get some water or go to the bathroom, and getting to the bathroom and realize that I don't have anything to do, right? Getting to the water dispenser and saying, I'm not really hungry. And then I realized that that was a procrastination response to sending that message for Oprah to be on my podcast. I would get up and go, and then I start to realize now, oh, that's what I do. And now I get excited. All right, that's the thing I should do. I have to go and send that email now. But that's what I mean, recognizing at that moment when I'm procrastinating. So what story did I tell myself? Well, I'm just Shane Ram. Is Oprah going to respond to me? Is she going to come on to my show? I only started the show in January 2021. I haven't built the credibility. All of those are stories. Okay. And then so applying that step number 3, is that real? Is that absolutely true? No. There is a possibility that she might say yes. Okay, so number 4, well, what's the powerful thought? Well, she could say yes. At least I could try. I will keep trying 100 times until she says yes. And what do? Take action. Go send the email. Yeah, so it's really important that although the coach may help you, you have to, when you're on your own, remember to do it in the moment.
Thank you for that. You had mentioned intuition earlier, and I know chapter 8 in your book is not just intuition, but it's specifically develop intuition.
Yeah.
And to the point that you have, you said in the book you want to develop a movement, #trust intuition.
Yeah.
I'm curious on the intuition. How does one go about developing intuition?
Okay. Well, the first thing is to understand that we have it. Okay. Being aware that we do have intuition. And maybe in the text in the book, I sort of intimated that maybe we would have had that gut feeling about something and it actually, came through. Or intuition could be ideas, because what intuition really is, it's like a higher level processing of our information and intelligence. Okay, so you have to, know something about your field to get intuitive feedback about that particular thing. If you know what I mean. So it's like a supercomputer processing that information, your knowledge, at a different level. And it's almost like, it's coming from a superior being. So it's like almost like you're always right if you utilize your intuition. So again, it's part of that, muscle of developing the muscle. If you go to the gym, knowing, and sometimes going to the gym to the first time, you realize, hey, I have this muscle that I didn't know exists before, right? So you become aware of it and you start to test it out. Okay, I feel an intuition. Let me act on the intuition. And the more that you act on it, you start to believe in the intuition. And from that process, it continues to grow. It's really trial and error. Maybe neuroscience one day will get to the level of being able to measure intuition, maybe the predictability of the intuition, just as how, neuroscience has, proven, for example, what we just spoke about, that the brain, so to speak, is malleable. When we thought many years ago, 20 years ago, that you had a personality, it was fixed. You were going to behave this way all the time. That's your personality. It's really tough to change. You just need to understand yourself in different situations and try to manage it. And I believe that we can get over it. As the case may be. So that's how I think about intuition. We all have it. It's a higher level processing of our knowledge and information that we have, and you can develop it by, as I said, being aware, taking those hunches, acting on them, and as you build the trust, it, like a muscle, it will build and grow.
Yeah, Shane, I have a question on that. I love where you went with that, Rich, as well. And I think one differentiation here is it's a higher level of processing about the knowledge and information you have. Sometimes I feel that my intuition I have around stuff I don't know much about.
Right.
So, for example, yesterday in the state of of the world here, Tesla invested a lot of money in Bitcoin. So I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe I should invest in Bitcoin. My intuition's
Right.
telling me invest in Bitcoin, but I know nothing about Bitcoin, so that's
Right.
probably not a good idea. Whereas if I have a lot of information or knowledge about something, is I think what you're saying, if I have a lot of information and knowledge about something and have the intuition, it's my super processor that I should probably trust and go with. Is that correct?
Yes, it's correct. And during the process of developing your intuition, I think you will begin to differentiate between, is it really intuition, or is it like one of the fears associated with that is the FOMO, fear of missing out. Well,
Yes.
so whether so an emotion is different from an intuition, and that's part of the learning process that you can develop to learn the difference, because
Can you
that fear
speak
of,
more about
missing
that,
out.
Shane? Can you speak
Ab-
more about emotion versus intuition? I think
yeah,
I might, just in the
that's
moment of you saying that, I'm like, I'm not sure I get the difference.
okay. So let me give you a personal example. Okay, so I had this job, good job, I would say. Didn't go long hours. Company gave me a BMW to drive around with. There was a nurse on the compound, good medical treatment, good work-life balance because there were no long hours. And then I had this opportunity to work for a startup. Okay, so um, I crave the opportunity to work with this blank sheet of paper, because I was literally structuring the organization, building the organizational structure, recruiting all the people, putting in the systems. So I was enthusiastic about that, but I had a serious gut pain. It wasn't intuition, it was the fear what if it doesn't work out? Am I going to be able to get back my job? Am I going to be able to get another job? Okay, so what happens is that was actually fear speaking. So I explain to people the difference between fear and danger, because most people don't understand that, and we react the same way towards those emotions. So I guess below all of that is becoming more emotionally intelligent. And one of the critical things that are not often thought, I haven't heard much people talk about it, is to separate fear and danger. And you need and it requires, or it is best to have two separate responses and two opposite responses, I call it, because I wasn't in any danger, but how the mind operates is that, okay, if they don't get the license to operate, I'm going to be out of a job. I don't know if I'll get another job. I won't therefore have a salary. And the mind continues to continue the story. The survival mode is, I'm not going to have money. I'm not going to be able to buy food. I'm going to starve and I'm going to die. That's what the nervous system does in a few, right? So we process that, but it was really fair. I really was not in any danger. And so a burning building, yes, that is danger. A wild, dangerous animal coming at you, yes, that is danger. So what you want to do in the case of danger is to run, take cover, okay? But fear, on the other hand, actually signals what you should move towards. Whereas danger, you move away from. Okay, so that's a level of emotional intelligence that I think that people need to develop, entrepreneurs, leaders need to develop, to understand the difference between fear and danger. And fear is a signal of what you should move into. And that's why we have the sayings, feel the fear and do it anyhow. Lean into your fear, so to speak, because it's really a different level of guidance system. So that's how I could explain emotion that could sometimes erode the intuition, so to speak. So for me, in that case, it was pure fear. It was emotion. It wasn't intuition, but I leaned into it, and that's why I could share the story now. And my entire trajectory of my career changed because of that one decision. I mean, I had sleepless nights about it, and the story is ruminating in my head. But over the course of time, you understand now what those feelings mean.
Is there the opposite of that also on the emotion side? So you're talking about on emotion, if it's fear versus your intuition, you sometimes don't want to follow the fear because there's not really danger. What about on the other side, on the positive side of it? Like where I'm really excited about something, but maybe I have a habit of just chasing the next shiny object. Like, how does that fit in with the emotion versus intuition?
Well, exactly, because sometimes in my emotional intelligence training, I talk about not acting when you're super angry or super negative, and also not acting when you're super excited and you're super happy, because you might also do some crazy things when you're in that state. Okay, so yes, it can still be emotional overriding the intuition. So intuition comes more, I would say, Rich, from really being mindful, meditating, slowing the mind so that you allow, so you sort of quieting the noise so that the intuition comes through. That's how I see it. So you really can't have that in a super excited state, I would say, or super depressed state.
Yeah, so that's powerful. I took a note on not acting when the emotion is running high. Don't trust those actions if it's running high positive or running high negative. Don't act yet. Don't make big decisions yet. But when the noise is more quiet, what your physical sensations or your body might be telling you to do next, that's where your intuition lies.
Absolutely.
Is that accurate?
Got it.
Very cool.
So I shouldn't have bought the Bitcoin last night, right?
You were too excited. Was it fear, John, or were you excited? Were you thinking about the big payout?
I had FOMO. I had fear of missing out. I had to get in. I was too excited, but I should have let it subside. I would have had a clearer mind today, and maybe would have saved a little couple bucks.
Which it was from an original sensitizing event of being left out, maybe in childhood, that led to this belief, that led to the story, that led to this action of buying the Bitcoin.
That's exactly it.
we're on it, Shane.
Yeah,
we're
got it. That's my mission. I just want, as many people who can impact others to really understand that, because when you even if you look at Tony Robbins, he talks about the power of beliefs, and beliefs is drives your destiny, but he doesn't necessarily get into the neuroscience of it. And I guess his way of fixing it, so to speak, might be a little bit different, walking through the coals, that sort of story. Not everyone might want to do that, but I think it's sort of, as the world develops, some things are coming to fruition, and I'm just really blessed and happy to be able to get this information, because one of the other leaders in the US, and I would say globally, about this way and method of coaching is Mastin Kipp is his name. Oprah calls him, the next Tony Robbins, so to speak. And he calls, he's a little bit braver than I am, I guess, because I'm trying to balance that world and the corporate and entrepreneurship world. But he basically, comes out and says that, those original sensitizing events are actually trauma and traumatic. Okay, that's a method I use. Neuroscience informed, evidence based, trauma informed coaching is what it's called. But as I said, he goes full out, and I do trauma informed coaching. So he, I was developing my coaching process, utilizing my evidence from working with my clients, and then I joined his newsletter, and I said, this guy is saying the same thing I'm saying. And I started to follow his stuff, and I was so glad, and it gave me a lot of courage to come out and say it, because you see, in coaching at that time, and probably I would say still is, they would say, coaching is looking forward. That what I'm talking about is actually therapy and counseling, and that's looking backward. But the new paradigm is, slowing down to speed up. You need to understand the impact of those events to be able to actually move forward. So the traditionalist type of coaches were not venturing down that path, because they're like, that's for the psychologists. That's for them to go back and figure out all the past events, etc. But we're now recognizing that's really the key, because there's another famous statement and saying that says the only way out is through. The only way out is through. So it's that you are going through that original sensitizing event, but choosing to make a different decision, a powerful instead of a primal decision, to form a different belief about that. So a quick example. So let's just say you have a single model with 2 or 3 kids, as the case may be. She has a job. She has a hole of a boss, and she needs to get, everybody ready for school, all dressed, have breakfast, lunch packed, books packed, get them in the car, drop them off to daycare or whatever, and get to work by 9 or whatever the start time is, because the boss is going to shout at her. So she's like, "Oh, Rich, you spilled the milk. John, you didn't put on your shoes yet." And she's like this, what is little Rich and what is little John going to believe about themselves? I always get it wrong. Mummy's always, shouting at me, so to speak. So one of the things that we do in reprogramming is to, now in the adult world as well, it's called multiple scenarios, because a child is basically egocentric. They only see things one way through their eyes, not really considerate or aware of what's happening with other people. But now when you take an adult looking at that situation, they could really see it for what it is. Mommy was just trying to get us all organized and get us to school, and she loves me. It's not like she didn't love me or she didn't think much about me. It's just in that moment trying to manage all of this. So wow, when you realize that you have lived your life on this false belief, some people you could like, oftentimes when I go through this with people, it's like a aha moment, and there's instantaneous transformation. Yeah.
Yeah, I could totally see that as an adult reframing
Yeah.
what that original sensitizing event was really about.
Yes.
Whereas a child that felt, either neglectful or abusive or somehow hurtful, but that's just a misunderstanding of a child. And then as an adult, creating the story that is not just more empowering, but more true,
Yes.
and acting through that. Very powerful. Thank you so much for being on today. I know we're at the top of the hour. Want to respect your time and our listeners, and this is really deep stuff, worth a second listen to, and really appreciate your investment in our listeners in this way.
Absolutely, Rich. And John, thank you for the opportunity of helping me to get this message across to more people. So I absolutely enjoyed my time with you guys. Looking forward to another chat anytime you're ready. Anything you want to talk about in relation to the book, the process, I'm more than happy to share with you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. Look forward to reading the book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay with us for a few more minutes while Rich and I break down the podcast.
John, the connection that Shane is drawing with this original sensitizing event and kind of recreating the story around that original sensitizing event, it's something that, I draw to former guests of ours also. That's very similar to what Keith Abelo had talked about with pain to power. It's very similar to what C-Rock talked about with his book on rocket fuel. It was all about turning setbacks into rocket fuel. And then again, here Shane is talking about this original sensitizing event, this thing that happened. I love his quote from Oprah that was like, "There's nothing wrong with you, but something happened."
Yep.
And then reframing what that is and turning it into something positive. It seems to be a reoccurring theme with our guests, and that just occurred to me. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. Do you see that string?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in this conversation we got to a deeper level of psychology on exactly what is underneath the onion, which I think is really strong in terms of, you have this particular behavior you're exhibiting and what's behind it. And as you peel back the onion and go through the stories and the emotions and the beliefs, there's something at the deep root of that happened that may have happened when you were 6 months old. Doesn't matter. Like, it happened in your past. You may not even know about it consciously, but how can you rebuild that and tell yourself the right story? And I really, think as an entrepreneur, executive, manager, it doesn't really matter what your role is within the business world. As you said many times, slowing down to speed up, and that self-awareness process, it's impossible to do on your own. And having people around you that can give you that feedback of what your blind spots are, so you can see it for what it is, and then see it better than it is, and then create a plan to go be better than it is something I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs and or business people take the opportunity to do. We're go, 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 go all the time. I think that's one of the benefits I had from my recent sabbatical in 2019 is I really stopped and did a lot of self-reflection, a lot of thinking, slowed way down, all the way down to the lowest possible point, and rebuilt where I wanted to go faster. And so I highly encourage entrepreneurs to do that. And how they do that, though, whether it be getting the book and going through the workbook themselves, or really engaging a peer coach or an executive coach, or even executing a 360 on themselves, those are not easy things to do. It takes discipline. It takes desire to go do it.
You talk about the slow down, the speed up, and that even came out in the questions around intuition. That it was like, until things slow down a little bit, you may not want to trust whatever that feeling is that you're having, whether it's really excited or not really excited. I know it's made a big difference for me since I've learned meditation. Now it's a non-religious meditation, sitting, eyes closed, repeating again a non-religious mantra for 20 minutes in the morning. Probably half of the days I take the opportunity to invest in myself with another 20 minutes in the afternoon. But boy, I can really relate with this slowing down piece to be able to speed up, and what that's done for me since I learned it 4-ish years ago.
Yeah. One of the things I originally learned in the sports world that carries over to the business world, even carries over to your personal world, is the concept of a 24-hour rule. You're hot and heated at the coach of your kid's baseball team because he wasn't playing when he should have been playing or whatever happened. And do you go walk up to that coach that moment after the game when you're heated, or you wait 24 hours? And so in sports, there's a 24-hour rule. And I've learned to deploy that in business as a leader. If I'm hot about something, an employee didn't do something right, or something didn't work well with a vendor or a customer, taking that 24 hours is really that slowing down process. And so, there's another way to look at it. Instead of when your emotions are high or low, don't act, just give it 24 hours. It's a very simple rule. Don't send that email you just wrote, put it in drafts, relook at it again tomorrow and figure out if you need to send it. I've probably saved myself a ton of negative energy from that slow down 24-hour rule process that I think he talks about. And if you have that intuition to say, do I really need to do this right now? It's not feeling right, and waiting 24 hours till things slow down, you'll probably have a much better intuition at that point on what you should be doing.
It's funny you say that. A different way to say the same thing I used Thursday last week. I was coaching somebody in our business, and they were going to communicate something to someone that I didn't think would be in their best interest. But instead of telling them, no, don't do that, or that's not in your best interest, what I chose to say was, if that's a good idea, it'll be a good idea tomorrow.
Yep.
Just sleep on it for a day. Just, if it's a good idea, like you think you want to do it now, you think it's a really good idea. If in fact it's a good idea, it'll still be a good idea tomorrow.
Yep.
Then act on it. And, sure enough, it was not acted on, because sleeping on it more normalized, some of the emotion that the person was having at that time. So very similar to your 24-hour rule.
Yeah. And I think the big thing, if I just go back to the intuition versus FOMO, the fear of missing out, I think that's a really powerful thing. It connected with me in one spot that I don't think it ever connected with me before, which is
Bitcoin.
No, not Bitcoin, because that was absolutely FOMO. That was a fear of missing out. I don't know what's going on, but there's a lot of energy around this. I don't want to miss it. But intuition is where you have a lot more understanding of the subject, and your gut's telling you something. That processing computer in your system is telling you, you have enough information here. This is intuition. You should act this way or that way. There's a big difference between intuition and FOMO. They shouldn't be connected. It's very similar to the difference between fear and danger. They're two different things. Fear, you should lean into fears and go after them and not be afraid of them. Whereas danger, be careful, right? You may want to go the other way. But that was a big connection point for me, is to trust my intuition when I know more about the subject. Trust your intuition. If you don't know a lot about the subject, you may just be excited about the fear of missing out.
Yeah, powerful. I love it. Well, happy to have had Shane on and have this conversation with you. And it's just interesting, the links and how you and I are speaking some of the same language slightly differently, and how the same thing's happening with our guests.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait to read his book in the horizontal format
That's right.
and try that out. So I'm going to go ahead and get that right away.